Hey again, everybody. This is Julia Volkman, and I'm here to respond to the questions you guys sent me after my 26-minute whirlwind tour of Mind, Brain, and Education. So I just want to note first that your questions totally aligned with the 3 neural networks for learning that were presented in my first talk, which was the recognition network would fit in for this great question about mirror neurons and trying to recognize which system we're talking about and just notice what is going on with the system. So there you go. Next, we have the affective network question, which is about why does this matter? How has it personally affected you and your work, right? And then we have the third neural network about strategic network. What's going to happen in the future going forward in 30 to 50 years down the line? What's education going to look like? So I'm just saying, that was really cool. So the first question is on mirror neurons. And do mirror neurons as a system really exist? Or are they just normal neurons doing normal sensory processing as described by embodied cognition? Most excellent question. We spoke about mirror neurons being the experience of biologically participating in another person when you perceive that they are experiencing something. There is a debate on whether the system is distinct from embodied cognition, and I just have a little more information on that. First of all, mirror neurons are thought to be primarily motor neurons that are triggered by sensory neurons as they witness the actions performed by others. There's a little more on that. There's some controversy, like I mentioned, about that, and if you want to read about that, you can read the book by a lawyer who wrote about it, not a neuroscientist. The neuroscientist did respond to that book to try and clarify a few points, to say that mirror neurons really do rely on motor experience. So mirror neurons become active when they perceive actions that are within their own motor repertoire. You must have done something before to get a mirror neuron activation. For example, barking would not trigger a human, right? Mirror neuron, because we have most of us, direct experience with barking. Okay, it'd be like our ears were deaf. No big deal for us. Mirror neurons also act as translators. They're goal detectors. So there's a mirror mechanism specifically that's theorized to exist that allows mirror neurons to translate an observation, the sensory information, into an action goal, motor information. So for example, if you're looking at this picture, you would need some context to understand what the intention or the goal of the behavior was. If you realized you hadn't had tea yet and were getting ready to have tea, your mirror neurons would trigger a perception in your motor system that you were about to be drinking tea. Whereas if you had a different context, your mirror neuron system would trigger you to arrive at a different conclusion. But again, this is translating sensory information into motor, goal-oriented information. And that's the general mirror neuron system theory. Embodied cognition has a different approach, which looks at both sensory and motor systems working together to process and retrieve semantic knowledge. So for example, if you're reading the word blue, you would kind of simulate your direct experience of blue. And so your sensory system would be activated together with your motor system in more of an embodied perceptive process. So from an educator's perspective, I'm not sure that this isn't kind of a chicken and an egg difference. It's difficult, I think, right now for the science to say something is definitely one way or the other. And this is usually the case with science. There's a lot of uncertainty, really good evidence on both sides that could influence your interpretation. From an educator standpoint, it seems to me the most intelligent response is to provide both excellent behavior role models for our students and opportunities for direct, repeated experience of the top concepts. Then we're going to kind of hit the big topics that are in both fields of theory at the moment. I hope that makes sense and you can walk the talk would be the big takeaway from that. Next question, how has MBA study influenced my own teaching? Whoa, in every way, in every way. When I first took the Introduction to Mind, Brain, Education course, I was already scheduled to do some speaking at conferences, and I decided to change the way I would present my little 1.5 hour talk to, a few hundred people were coming. And I decided to change it based on the principles of mind, brain, and education. And I did a little study to see what would happen. And I did a great poster, like the poster, presentation at the International Montessori Congress a few years ago to discuss my results, the techniques I employed, and the results I found. So skipping to results, first of all, participants thought it was effective, right? Woohoo! All right, hooray, but does that mean anything? I don't know. 1 month after we had this little workshop, some of the targeted practices that we had discussed in this neuroscience-informed workshop had changed and maintained change 1 month after the workshop. So that's a trend in a positive direction. And so these are the strategies that I employed. So here we are, here we have me, right, and the lecture. No more standing up and doing lectures, right? These are some of the strategies that I did, and you can read more about it if you want to read the poster presentation, which is linked to the references at the end of this little talk. Pretty cool stuff, simple to apply with potentially significant positive results. Okay. Mentoring is another aspect of my work. I'm often called into classrooms to help a teacher who wants to improve her practice or who the school is concerned about and needs to improve her practice. Traditionally, the approach has been to come in, sit down, watch the teacher while she's teaching, and then later sit and talk and say, I saw X, Y, and Z, so this is a problem, right? Okay. As you might imagine, this was not the most effective method. I would go back into the classrooms to follow up and there were no changes. And the teachers were kind of crabby with me, like they didn't really want me to come. So obviously, not a good approach, and you can understand why. So I've changed my practice dramatically. Now I go in and observe together with the teacher. We sit down next to each other and we watch the children. I'm not focused on finding negative aspects of her. I can give a strengths-based approach, look at things that are working in the environment and the children, their independence, their focus on work, their interests, their engagement with pedagogical materials. And then later we can talk about what we saw. Some really great things. Children will always show you fantastically wonderful things. So you have something good definitely to talk about. And then you have some things that you notice children were getting blocked by. They couldn't work around. And so the teacher and I arrive at that collectively. Much more effective approach. And I see better improvement in practice as a result of that. So that's how MBE has changed my mentoring practice. And right now, I am just back last night from Memphis, where we are radically changing the face of teacher education in a pilot program for public Montessori school teachers. The big change here is that it's very applications-based, very strengths-based, and not a front-loaded theory, sit behind a desk, apply it later model. Traditionally, if any of you have been to teacher training programs, you see it's very university kind of structured classroom based, and you're not in the classroom with the children formally, typically. Instead, this particular model is an immersion model where we have a day or so of orientation, acclimation to the process, to the physical environment, and then we start teaching them, just like they were the students that we want them to teach. We introduce them to the environment in this way that we're modeling for how they would introduce the children. We engage them in lessons, presentations, materials, in ways we want them to engage the children in the materials, and bring them through a progression of activities to help children acquire specific academic components of their education. It's only day 4, but so far so good. We're optimistic that this is really going to be a transformative approach. After this pilot, we're hoping to replicate it, but we won't have real news until we see the teachers in the classroom, which we will see in September, and we'll see if they're able to do well. Okay, so the future. What does the future of education hold? Dun, dun, dun. No more passive learning. None of this, right? No more one-size-fits-all linear education. Okay. No more denial of physiology. And I've got this teenager here. They need to sleep. Waking up at 5 a.m. to get the bus to get to school for 7 doesn't work for teenagers. They only got to bed at 1. They like the night. So physiologically intelligent, strengths-based education. Experiential, discovery-based. Mixed age groups and mixed ability groups that embrace variability. It is truly our strength. We learn so much from it. And approaches that are generally just customized to human development. When we're 3, the approach that we use in someone who's 15 is not going to work. We are different at different ages, and the brain has dramatically different capacities, particularly in those early years, and different ways that it can acquire learning and instigate plasticity, so to speak. So those are my big ideas. Here are references if you want to follow up any more. I hope you guys are having an awesome time there in Japan, and that we can keep in touch. Please email me if you'd like to follow up. My email is juliav@maitreelearning.com, and I hope to hear from you.